Yes, I had to do a double that time because I didn't do it last week because we had a great guest. Welcome to Shutdown Inning podcast. Stephen Risotto here with Tylor Hall. Tyler, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. Doing good. Steven, how are you?
I'm doing good. This is episode 11. So we mentioned that
We
we're kind of in
Here
the
we are.
double digits. We're in the tens, as they say.
Yeah. I can't even flash up the fingers anymore like I was doing for the people that are on YouTube, watch us on YouTube. But yeah, keeping it going, getting through the off season pretty well. We're just about a month from spring training. So, we're trudging through, Steven. We're almost to baseball again.
Almost to baseball again, and we should probably mention if anybody didn't listen or watch the last episode with Barry Bloom from Sportico on the Hall of Fame, we highly suggest going back and listening to episode 10. It was awesome. We want to give Barry some props because hopefully he's now a listener of
Yeah.
ours. Um, but
Yeah.
it
Thank
was
you, Barry.
fantastic. It was a really good conversation, I think.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You and I are both kind of Hall of Fame nerds, and I've read Barry for a long time, so it was cool to talk to him for a little bit. I hope our listeners enjoyed it as well. So thank you again, Mr. Barry Bloom.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to the occasional guest coming on the shutdown inning and help us get some batters out here using that the illusion
Heyo.
there. AO. But a lot also did go down in baseball since we last did kind of one of these banter shows. And I guess starting with one of the big stories in baseball and probably I know Judge was a big story, but other than Judge, the biggest story of the offseason has been whatever the hell Carlos Correa has been going through.
I mean, I think it has to be the biggest. It's not saying he's the biggest, free agent, but it's definitely the biggest story. I mean, people will be talking about the Carlos Correa saga, as a lot of people have called it, for a long time. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like this ever again, man. It was nuts, and it's finally over.
Finally over.
Um,
And I guess you're right because Judge like it more or less affected like one team, the Yankees, and like the Giants were in the Padres. We don't know how involved the Padres were in. But
yep.
Correa signed with three teams this offseason, like agreed to three different deals, took like at least three physicals, probably more, I think with the Twins, I think I heard. And he finally settles back to where he was last year in Minnesota, a 6-year deal
Yeah.
worth $200 million. There's a ton of there's a ton of options there at the end too. I was looking at the little blueprint that we have for these episodes, and we added in a shit ton of options, vesting options depending on
Yeah.
plate appearances. But I mean, what a wild thing happened. I guess we could kind of
Yeah. I
dig into
mean, well, I mean, like you said, three deals, not just three deals where the cheapest one, the floor was 200 million and the ceiling was 350 million. I mean, we're not talking like guy trying to get like a 2 year, a lot of money. And you know, I think for all the concerns that came out with the Giants and Mets, I think the Twins first, getting back involved was a smart move for them, and also just how they structured this thing, where it was just like, hey man, your ankle is obviously a concern, and if you most of the options are plate appearance based. So if you stay on the field and you're healthy, like you're going to get paid the next year. Your first 6 years are basically guaranteed, and after that, if you're healthy and you're on the field, you're going to get paid. And I think for someone who has been a top tier player but also has some health concerns, I mean, I think that's fair for both the player and the team. So I mean, I'm not surprised. I wish, a team in the Bay Area would have swooped in with that kind of idea. But I think the most awkward thing is, you know, going back to the team you already were after you tried to sign with two different teams and be like, this is where I was always meant to be.
Yeah, no, it is a bit of a cliche. And like one of the things that I'm like really consumed with is like the storylines that relate to each team. So like the Giants, like now did they get, the question is, did they get kind of like, do they look better coming out of this now? Because the Mets, I think the Mets look pretty bad too, with the owner Steve Cohen talking about how this is the final piece we had, and he never alluded to Correa specifically, but the night it happened, like he was, you know, for sure thinking that Carlos Correa was going to be a member of that organization. And I don't know if there's going to be any like investigation that goes into that. I'm sure the Players Association might have an interesting time with that. And then there's the Correa himself and what he went through with his family. And there's just so many angles to this. But I do think the Giants do end up looking a little bit better. Not 100% validated. I don't think they ever will be. But like I think you got to look at like at least into year 3 with this contract to, have any of these guys, any of these teams validated. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the Giants are validated from the aspect where when they first pulled out of the deal, everyone just thought they got cold feet and they didn't want to sign a guy for $350 million. And so it was just a terrible look. Like, why would any big free agent ever want to sign here if they might get cold feet at the end? So I think they're validated there where, there is, at least to some extent, I don't think we'll ever know this part either, but like to what extent is this concern? But another team having that same concern and kind of, eventually actually pulling out as well, I think it validates them there. But, Carlos Correa could easily stay healthy for the next, I think if he plays, like if you're the Giants and you had 13, 350 on the table, if he plays a solid 7 or 8 years, that's pretty much what you expect out of a 13-year deal anyway. You're paying for 7 or 8 solid years, and then there's going to be some decline. And so, I think as far as, should they have still signed him, we'll know down the line if that was a good move or not. But I think as far as, how they're viewed around baseball, they're vindicated in that aspect, at least, that they're not, I don't think another free agent would be scared to sign here.
Yeah, and I know that the Correa camp is bringing up the ankle injury, and they're talking about how, well, this never affected me. I never missed games because of it, and that's a fact. Like he's never missed any games because of the ankle injury that happened 10 years ago. But obviously, something that came up, and it came up, and it scared both teams away. And I cannot blame. And I know a lot of fans are, gonna possibly boo Carlos Correa wherever he goes. I don't think that this is his fault. This is a guy who's going after a contract that he very much deserves. He's been working very hard to set himself up, to set his family up for wealth that, generational wealth, really. And he ends up losing $100 million because of it. And there is a part of me that does feel bad for him, and what he went through, and thinking that he was going to go to two different cities. It's a tough thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gonna still. I mean, he could still not lose, quote unquote, lose $100 million, especially if he stays on the field like he's confident he will, and those vesting options with the Twins kick in. So, I don't think he's gonna lose $100 million. He's still gonna lose a chunk of it because I don't think he'll ever get to like 350. But I mean, as far as he hasn't missed time, like you said. So it's not. I don't think at first some people were like, especially when they pivoted quick to the Mets, like, oh, they know something's wrong and they're just trying to like, hoodwink a team pretty much and just get money while they can. But I honestly think that as far as he's concerned, he's been healthy. His ankle's fine. Why are they? He was surprised that these teams were viewing it, and obviously two teams were scared away, and so obviously they see something where it might not affect you yet, but it very likely might down the road. So I'm in the boat with you. Like I can't fault the guy. I think he was trying to take care of his family and whatnot. And speaking as a Giants fan, like he wanted to be a Giant. I know The Athletic recently had a piece, and I didn't read the whole thing because I didn't want to relive it all and just get completely pissed off again. But he knew that he wasn't going to like sign with the Giants and they were going to be necessarily a competitor, like a World Series contender this year. He was willing to be a Giant, put the 2 or 3, 4 years in to be able to, pass the Padres and the Dodgers. So as a Giants fan, I hope if you're a Giants fan listening, like no reason to boo this guy. He wanted to be a Giant. He reached out to Crawford when he signed. He did all the right things, and he wanted to be a Giant and he wanted to make it work. And so, it just didn't work out for the Giants, and that sucks. But, I hope Giants fans, Mets fans, whatever. I mean, your team, it's not like he ended up getting 300+ million from your team and then getting hurt. So you can't hate the guy. I mean, whatever, you know what I mean? It would be silly to boo him when he comes to town.
Yeah.
I for one will cheer him because he wanted to be a Giant.
There you go. That's a nice different change of mind there. I haven't seen that take yet out there, but now we have. And one other thing with the Mets, I think it hurt I don't think it hurts them that much, to be honest, because I didn't really think that they needed him. They had a really good third baseman already in Eduardo Escobar, who was, playing like an all-star at points last year. So it's kind of like they didn't really need Correa. They had a complete team without him. So it would have hurt it. I think it hurts the Giants much more, and I think it would have hurt the Mets. Or sorry, it would have hurt the Twins if they didn't re-sign him. So I think the Twins really come out of, as a winner because his impact on the Twins is far bigger of an impact than he would have made with the Mets because they have so many guys that would have been around him. He didn't need to be that guy. With the Twins, he's kind of that guy. With the Giants, he would have been that guy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I can't really think of anything else the Twins have done really of note this off season. And so, at least, the obviously the Mets added a ton of guys. Um,
I was meant to be here.
the Giants added, yeah, the Giants added a bunch of guys too. If the Twins don't get Correa, all they did this offseason was like lose Correa. So I think, this worked out beautifully for the Twins. It's, a little higher annual value than what the Mets and the Giants were on the table for, but it's also, half of the guaranteed commitment lengthwise. So, I think all in all, I hope he stays healthy. I hope, I don't want anyone to get hurt, but I hope he stays healthy and then has a great rest of his career, with the Twins or whoever else he goes to after he's done in Minnesota.
I think we see a few more of these like deals falling apart like this one did. Whether it be, I don't think it would be like, two different deals falling apart in the same offseason, but just because the amount of money that's being committed to these players nowadays, like it's a lot of money. And like these teams, they really do want to do their due diligence and they really do want to get the accurate
Yeah.
injury, reports in. And it's much different if you're like sneaking a guy through a physical, when it's a 2 year, $25 million deal or something like that. But when you're committing 13 years to a guy, like I think looking back at it, everybody was irrational about this situation, especially in San Francisco. I'm sure the Mets went through kind of the same thing with their fan base. But I think looking back at it now, like it does make sense to the, why the Giants wanted to get their experts in there, their doctors, and I kind of do have a little bit more sympathy. Obviously the Giants offseason has not been what they hoped. A lot of,
Mm-hmm.
surrounding cast and characters, but I think I don't know. I just feel like
Well,
that caution is good to be taken in that situation.
yeah, and and teams don't want to have a deal fall apart by a physical because by that point, in most cases, the deal's already been announced. And we just talked about, how does this impact like the image of the Mets and the Giants long term? Teams don't want their image and their reputation questioned. So they're not going to pull out of a deal unless it's something they're actually truly concerned about. So I don't think it'll be something where like, hey, let's just agree to this deal and then like we'll think about it for a phase. And if we don't, we'll just say we found something crazy in the physical. Like they don't want that reputation going around about themselves. So, I wouldn't be surprised though now that, I mean, hell, we were talking when Correa signed, they're like, the biggest deal in 30 years since Bond signed. And 30 years ago, the biggest deal that he signed was like 46 or $47 million. Now we're adding 300 million. And next year with Ohtani, maybe 450 million onto that. And so, yeah, teams are going to be a lot more cautious and looking at the health of these players as they're handing out these, crazy figures.
Yeah, but
So I just want to
yeah.
say I don't think teams are going to use it as like a loophole to get out of deals if they get nervous because it brings their credibility to question. So I don't think it'll be something that becomes necessarily a trend. But yeah, when you're throwing around hundreds of millions of dollars, if you see something you're not sure of, you're going to look into it.
I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it's over for him, and I'm glad that this could be all wrapped up and he could have his name officially to a team. So I guess congrats to Carlos
Yeah,
Correa on this deal, and hopefully all of those vesting options get picked up because he's definitely a great player, and it'd be a shame to see this ankle thing. Um, I guess be I guess adapt to the forecast of what some of these teams that passed up on him had kind of
yeah,
foresaw. So hopefully his ankle holds up good for
yeah.
sure. But one of the other big news that we saw was one of the top free agent options for next offseason is kind of out of that conversation now because Rafael Devers, the third baseman for the Red Sox, is staying put in Boston. Boston has kind of had a weird offseason. They're kind of in a weird, competitive position right now where nobody knows what they are, but they lock up their kind of franchise guy with a 10-year, $313.5 million deal. Any first reactions to this one?
I mean, my first reaction was next year's free agent class was already very weak, and now it's extremely weak. I mean, now it's Otani, maybe Machado if he opts out, and then like a dumpster fire. So like if your team is looking to improve next offseason, it's going to be really dicey to try to find an impact uh bat or player of any really caliber on the market. It's going to be very few and far between. But yeah, I was also kind of surprised. I'd read some stories about people questioning his work ethic a little bit. So I know some people were just kind of surprised that it wasn't Bogarts that was getting locked up long term, that it was Devers. And I think I don't know if they were waiting to see if they could bring Bogarts back or what. But I mean, obviously, if they can work it through, and hopefully for Boston, it works out better than the last time they signed a marquee third baseman on the free agent market, which was our good friend Pablo Sandoval. Didn't really work out for him. But, I think if he can keep playing like he is, I mean, he's an awesome player to build around because he can mash. But I think the thing is, can he stay motivated? Can he perform and can he keep it up? But what was your reaction?
Yeah, no, my first thought was the free agent market for next year because like we're our like immediate reaction is to always look forward for the next thing. And like we're in the middle of the offseason this year, and all we hear about this offseason is Otani and what's going to happen next year. It's like anything that happens this offseason like automatically relates to Otani. It's like, oh, the Dodgers aren't spending money. Otani. Giants miss out on Correa. Probably Otani. So and
Yeah.
like you just mentioned, kind of taking everything you just said there and bundling it up, like Devers was that next guy. He was the next name on the market. He's young enough to where he was going to get that 10-year deal, and he did, obviously. But I think his defense is a big issue. I don't think it is a big enough issue to where it hides all the monster production that he has. But I think it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
not a stretch to like see him moving to first or see him DHing. And then another thought I had was like, holy hell, Boston, you know, did this because I didn't think Boston had it in them. I thought that, given their track record of not bringing back Mookie Betts, not bringing back JD Martinez, not bringing back Xander Bogaerts, Andrew Benintendi, they had a nice kind of cast of characters that they just kind of slowly dissembled, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it was no longer there. And Devers is going to be that guy that they commit to, and I think that's good for the fans. I like guys that stay in one place for their entire careers. And again, he's a guy that mashes. There's some great hitters ballparks in the American League East. I see him aging well with the bat, but I think the question is defensively. And the question is where the Red Sox heading? Because I don't know. I last I heard their farm system was shot, so it's
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
an
to
interesting
me, I
topic.
wouldn't be surprised if they looked ahead too, and they're like, okay, if we, because like Boston fans are notorious for if they're not happy, they're going to let the organization hear about it, just like New York fans, your Philly fans, and they might have looked ahead like we were, okay,
Mhm.
next off season, what do we do? Well, if they don't sign Devers, there's no one else to go after, and like you mentioned, their farm maybe isn't the best. They need to be able to maintain some kind of relevance, especially in the
Mhm.
AL East. And they have to at least they need an anchor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to be drifting off to sea and not never catching the Yankees or the Rays, for the foreseeable future. So they need to at least do a little bit while they can. And their chance right now was to not let Devers hit the free agent market. Let's lock him up now while we can, and then we'll do the rest on the fly, which is probably what they'll have to do.
Yeah. I mean, obviously third base is like a pressing issue for a lot of teams out there. And My mind also went to like I know Arenado opted in, but like imagine if he had tested the market this offseason, he might have gotten more with the way that like the position or in the position players were getting paid and maybe overpaid. Free agency is
Yeah.
just one big overpay, but in Arenado's case, I think, maybe he's like looking back saying, "Man, I should have opted out." And maybe Machado's looking at this market and also, comparing what Arenado got with his big extension and what Devers is getting, and maybe he's going to try and get another big deal. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
I think Arenado definitely would have gotten more, but it's a lot easier for us to sit back and say when it's not our risk to take.
exactly.
But I think the Giants would have maybe gone and pivoted after him instead of Correa. But easy to hindsight and what ifs and whatnot. But yeah, it'll
Yeah,
be interesting. Like I said, Boston fans are ferocious, and so now they've got at least a guide to have the back of for the next decade. So
yeah, and they should be competitive, like perennial, contenders, and they haven't been. And I think Devers is a nice step towards kind of building that back up and getting some pieces in there that could stay long term for the next
yeah,
wave of really good Red Sox teams.
yeah,
Kind of moving on here. This is kind of a
yeah.
controversial one, or do you want to
Yeah, I
add
mean,
something to the?
there's no. I'm just gonna say there's no way to pivot to this next one. It's
Yeah,
a polarizing topic, like Steven said, very controversial. But I mean, big news in baseball over the last week or so is the latest free agent to join the free agent market is Trevor Bauer, getting DFA'd by the Dodgers after his suspension was shortened. And yeah, I mean, you asked me first with Devers, so I'll ask you, what was your first reaction with Bauer becoming a free agent?
I wasn't shocked, but I did see like a conflicting report saying that the Dodgers, like the players had wanted him back, but then there was like a report that said they didn't want him back, so I was kind of confused, and then they released him. I think I I mean, I'll be frank about it. I don't see him ever playing in the big leagues again. I don't see a team like I wish I could think of a team with the front office just careless. I wouldn't say careless. Maybe it is careless to put their
Just
reputation and PR a hit like it would
willing
be.
to take the yeah willing to take yeah willing to
Yeah.
take that negative press.
I mean, who would be willing like this is like a move that like maybe 10 or 15 years ago there might have been somebody like there now like with everything going on in the country and the fallout from everything that's happened and like let's use Hollywood for an example, like
Mm-hmm.
those guys have gotten, that they're out of work. And I think the
Yeah.
same would go for Bauer. I just don't see him finding another opportunity in the big leagues. I do see him getting another chance somewhere. I don't know if he goes overseas. I don't know if he plays in just a separate, like, independent league or whatever. I have no doubt that he would still
He'll
be
be
an
on the
effective
Savannah Bananas.
Savannah Bananas. Yeah, I mean, would they? I mean, their whole thing is built around PR. Would they want Trevor Bauer? I mean,
No.
so that's interesting. But I have no doubt that he has stayed in shape. Like we know he's stayed in shape. He's on social media all the time. He's throwing every day. Um, but I just don't think that there's an organization that would pick him up. You know?
Yeah, I mean, when the suspension first happened, I was like, okay, I was like, that's a lifetime, unofficial lifetime ban, pretty much, and rightfully so in my eyes. I'm with you. I don't see any team that would be willing to do it. I mean, from a baseball aspect, it makes a lot of sense. A guy who could potentially, there's also a lot of people who are like, I don't think he's an ace. Like he won a Cy Young when he made 11 starts using the sticky stuff. And then other than that, he's been like, he's had some flashes where he's good and some flashes where he is like getting lit up and throwing balls from home plate over the center field wall. Um, but yeah, I just don't. The only team I could think of, and I don't think they will. On the record, I don't think anyone will. But like, the Astros are already public enemy number one,
Mhm.
and they already get crapped on wherever they go. It'd be someone like that, but I don't think it's a storm that anyone would want to take on. I've tried to think of teams, small market team. Well, small market team doesn't want to piss off their, if they're having attendance issues. they want to piss off half their maybe half the people that would come to their
Mm.
games, or if not more. This, yeah. I'm glad that I'm 99.99% confident that the Giants would never touch him, because I that would just be terrible for them and terrible any organization. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's controversial. It's a touchy subject for a lot of reasons, and I don't think we'll see him in a major league uniform again.
Well, one interesting thing is that like the Dodgers made it known this offseason. They said, we're not going after Carlos Correa because we don't know how our fans would take that. Like, and that's a guy that like may like we know what was happening in Houston in 2017, completely different than the Bauer thing. I want to use that as a disclaimer. But that was being said about Correa by the Dodgers, like reportedly that they didn't want to go after him because of the cheating scandal and how that scandal affected the Dodgers and the organization and the fan base. Maybe they wouldn't have accepted that. This is that times like every organization times like a million. Like if they were saying that about Correa and something that happened
Yeah,
like that's just a baseball integrity
that's a
thing. This
game.
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
game, and this is something that happened like life, like criminal issue, like horrible person issue, like it's definitely amplified. So I think that that's an interesting comparison. That I mean, so it's just like if that was happening with Correa, this is on a whole different level.
yeah, for sure. And I don't know if we want to say too much more, because apparently Bauer's lawyer, if you say anything bad about him, is coming for you. Shout out to Adam Copeland at KMBR.
That's
Yeah, I
part of
mean,
why they hate him too. It's like
yeah,
sometimes you just gotta shut up, right?
yeah,
And like this guy like just does not know how to keep his mouth shut for whatever reason. And like if you speak out against him, like you're gonna get hurt. But I don't mind.
yeah. No, yeah, he's shown like no remorse for anything that has happened, whether right, wrong, no matter what the story was. Some shady stuff went down, and he's not showing any remorse for what happened. Yeah, I mean, just a just a situation that everybody wants to avoid, rightfully so. And hopefully he has fun pitching in, like, Korea or Japan or
I would hope the Savannah Bananas don't like do
no, I
something
don't think they
stupid.
will. No, they won't. I mean, they're you go there to be entertained and have fun. They're like the Harlem Globetrotters you know of baseball. They don't want negativity. They want positivity. So yeah, I mean, that's enough said. Let's move to a much funner
Yeah.
topic.
And by the way, Dodgers on the hook for 22.5 million of that remaining one year.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Lighter topic, and we're going from one of the least liked players in baseball to one of the most liked, one of the most beloved everywhere. Andrew McCutchen returning back to Pittsburgh to raise the Jolly Roger for one more year. I was really happy when I saw it. I'm not a Pirates fan, but I'm a huge McCutchen fan. When I saw the news, I tweeted out how much I loved having him on the Giants, because he's just such a good dude, and I think it's really cool that he gets to go back. I'm assuming this is, maybe he'll keep writing 1 year deals with Pittsburgh, but I assume at least, if this is his last year, he gets to kind of finish where he started. He won the MVP there, basically made a name for himself there, and now he's got some young kids. If you saw his Instagram post, he's got some young kids who don't remember daddy playing in Pittsburgh, and now they will. That's really cool. I'm so stoked for Cutch. What were your feelings on that?
I like these past few years, like it's always great seeing Andrew McCutchen whenever, whatever team he's on. But I feel like the past few years it hasn't looked normal. Like it hasn't been the same seeing him in
Yeah,
different uniforms. He's just never been that guy that has appeared to be a guy who just moves around a lot. Like I still associate him with the Pirates, and I think a lot of
yeah,
people feel the same way. And I don't know, even when he was with the Giants, I just felt like something was off. When he was with the Yankees, something was off. Brewers, something was off. So it's been weird seeing McCutchen don like a few different uniforms the past few years. And I'm really happy that he's going back to Pittsburgh. Like he accomplished a lot there. Like he won an MVP there, as you mentioned, and he finished top five let's see, one, two, three, four times consecutively in top three times consecutively, and in between there he won it in 2013. So I mean, and he was in the conversation when Posey won it in 2012. I believe he finished third, and Posey finished first. And I mean, even like changing that entire Pittsburgh Pirates brand, like they were going through when he first came up, they were going through it like just a bad stretch of baseball there in the 2000s. They hadn't gone to the playoffs since the 90s. And that 2013 team was just really, really, really good. And he was kind of the highlight, kind of the unofficial captain per se of that team that made it back to the postseason for the first time in like 20 years or something like that. And again, just a guy who, he's going home, and I think he still lives in that area or still owns property in that area from what I read. But I mean, I hope that this isn't it for him. I think on the production scale, he's still a really good player. Um, Definitely a guy who could play. Still 17 home runs last year, hit 237,
Yeah.
but had a 700 OPS. Probably hits lefties pretty good still. So I think there's a lot in the tank for him. He's 36 years old, but I'm really glad that he's going home. I think it's a great fit bringing him to Pittsburgh where he could play, he could sell tickets, and it's just a great situation for everybody involved.
Yeah, I fully agree with all with you on all that. It was really weird to watch him bounce around. I just pulled him up on Baseball Reference too. It's crazy to think he's played for 5 teams now, especially as a guy that you associate with just one team, really. And yeah, I hope he plays a few more just because I still love watching him play. He just does it with so much joy, and that's what I love to watch because these guys are playing a kid's game at obviously the highest level, but to watch someone who doesn't lose that and keeps it kind of in his mentality and his approach is awesome to see. He's always one of my favorite social media follows in professional sports too, not just baseball. So I would give him a follow if you're not, whatever platforms you use.
Have you ever seen the
But
skits that he does with this kid? All right, he,
I've
he
seen it.
used to he used to do skits before he had a kid, but then he started doing like during COVID, he did like little science experiments with his son. Like they do like the Mentos in the bottle thing.
Yeah.
But he's yeah, no, I agree. He's a great follow on social media.
Yeah, just a really cool dude. So, hopefully, unfortunately, I don't see him. If this is his last year, I don't see him finishing with a trip to the playoffs. But, hopefully it's if he enjoys his return to Pittsburgh, and I'm sure the fans will love to have him back. So, it's always cool to see kind of like a franchise icon go back to where they where they're iconic for if they leave. And trying to think of like Pittsburgh Pirates icons like in my lifetime. And probably the last one might have been Bonds, and so he's the first one. And like, depending on when you start the clock and end the clock, 20, 30 years, he's the face of for the 2000s, he's the face of the Pirates, I would think. And so cool to see him go back.
Yeah, they just haven't had those players since like a lot of those. There's been a few like storybook teams like with the Willie Stargells and the Dave Parkers in the
Mm-hmm.
past, but nothing like yeah, nothing I don't think in our lifetime. And like when the Pirate like it was a big story. I remember in 2013 them breaking that postseason drought that they had, and that was just a great team to do it.
Yeah.
I think they ended up getting eliminated by the Cardinals. I think if I'm not mistaken, in 2013. I'd have to double check that. Or maybe the Reds, because the Reds were really good too, in 2013. But um, I can actually pull it up right now and give it in real
St.
time.
Louis. It was St. Louis in the
St.
DS.
Louis, yeah. So St. Louis kicked them out, but they did win that wild card game against the Reds. But he's important. I was just telling you off the air that I have three jerseys from guys with teams other than the Giants: Trout, Harper, McCutchen. And when I was first getting into baseball, those were my guys. So it's like really cool seeing like one of somebody who like was the face of the game when I was first starting to watch baseball, kind of still at it, going back to his old team.
Will the jersey still fit?
No, it won't. It won't. It's really small. The Harper and the McCutchen jersey won't fit. The Trout jersey is like borderline, like a little bit uncomfortable at the moment. Like I'd have to do some work there just a bit. Um, I'm starting to feel old now. I'm starting to sound old, but the McCutchen is going to be a hard pass. I'll send you a picture of me in it. It just won't look good.
All right. Sounds good. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think we don't need to repeat ourselves. We would say, awesome for McCutchen.
What a
So
horrible move.
I'm just gonna, yeah. Why would you want McCutchen on your team? I'm just gonna hard pivot to our final main topic. Pretty interesting. We've kind of heard about it for a few years. I think it was inevitable it would happen at some point, but robot umps are coming. And to me, it's even a little higher level than I expected it to be. Triple A. And, it seems like every year, January, February, we end up with just like finding out what baseball is going to test out in the minor leagues. It always seems like so sudden because it seems like the season ended forever ago and the teams are about to come to spring training and now they have all these rules. You think this one doesn't really affect who you'd sign necessarily, but you'd think it'd be like before free agency so teams know what rules they're playing under. But yeah, robot umps coming to AAA. It sounds like half of the AAA fields will have umps calling balls and strikes 100% of the time, and the other half will have almost like a challenge system where the pitcher and catcher and the batter can each challenge with a limit. And I think our first episode we talked about this a little bit because there was some video that had just come out of a minor leaguer, I think for the Yankees in like a independent
Might have been the
or
fall
in the
league.
fall ball
Yeah.
challenging, yeah, the fall league. And I thought that was interesting. So, what are your thoughts on robot umps, Steven? How are you feeling about this?
So like I was on the train of like robot umps for a while. I like the idea. Eric Burns kind of first tested it out in the independent league in Sonoma and in Santa Rosa, um, or sorry, San Rafael, with those teams. And I like the idea. I think we have the technology to do it to where you could customize it and match the stance, like height, match the height of the player, get it to the right angle to where it's a definitive strike because the TV zones are utter like bull. Like
Yeah.
it's at a fixed angle that's a little bit to the side. You're never gonna get a perfect angle from those cameras. So I think the TV zone is a bit of a disservice to the viewers. But I will say that it's kind of grown on me. Like I think what's grown on me the most is that I'm like I used to be in favor of it, but now I'm kind of at like a indifference about it because I do see the argument that like major league umpires behind the plate are really, really good. And a lot of the good ones, like they don't miss a lot of pitches during games. And I think that if we were to have a challenge system that would be able to like the ones that they're testing out right now in the minors, that would be good to challenge an umpire's like decision. But like what would be the point of doing it with the robotic strike zone? I know like one side I think right is having just the challenges and the other side's doing the robo
Mm-hmm.
umpiring. That's a little weird, but my like main takeaway from it is that I think that it will eliminate a lot of like the catching skills behind the dish. And I think if I'm not mistaken, you were a former catcher, so maybe you could attest
Mm-hmm.
to this. A lot of guys stick around that position because they are good pitch framers and because they're good
Yeah.
receivers. And now what you're doing is you're kind of, I guess, adding more offense, more offensive potential to that position where guys could just go in and mash and maybe receive well. You still got to call a game. You still got to throw runners out, but it's a little different in how, all these positions that are being taught with, you're on a knee, you
Yeah,
got,
you're sticking
yeah,
one leg out so you can get lower.
it would go
You
all out the
know,
window. So I guess that's the only hesitant thing, but I'm pretty indifferent about it, I think.
yeah, I am a former catcher. That's all I did from after coach pitch through high school. Like all I did was catch. I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and I was really good at receiving and framing and kind of stealing some strikes here and there. And the more I thought about it, especially on the major league level, was just like it is a skill, absolutely. But is it a skill that like guys should be rewarded for, because if you think about it, framing a pitch is really the only thing in baseball that you can kind of fake. Like you can't make a ball look like a home run so you get a home run for it, or you
Yeah.
can't make a ball look fair and get it called fair when it was actually foul. So you know what I mean there, where it's kind of
Mhm.
like one, it's tough for me, especially as a former catcher, saying that, and it's something I was good at. But I'm indifferent to it too. I would prefer them at least do with the challenge system, because, like you said, these umpires are really good, and so I think just, and I do love that human element of baseball. I think it's part of the reason why I started loving the game when I was a kid, and so yeah, if there's a big spot and you think an ump blew a call, challenge it, because they're going to be limited. And I think that'll do two things. It'll keep that human element, and it would also maybe help people realize how good these umpires are. Because if you watch the umpire scorecards, most of the time they're in like the high 90s%
Really
accurate
good.
on all their calls. And so maybe that would help show how tough an umpire's job is, and show people that these guys are actually really good at their jobs if you let them challenge it, instead of just saying, because like going full on robot ump makes it sound like these guys are just terrible at their jobs, and you need to just get rid of them and have a machine do their job. And I don't think that's fair to say, unless you're Angel Hernandez. But that's my take on it. I would be down for the challenge, because guys are going to get it wrong, and you'd hate to see in a big spot like in a playoff game, or a game in September, a game get decided by a shitty call. And
Mhm.
so I'd be down for the challenge. If it ends up going full robot, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I won't really enjoy it. I'm sure I'll get used to it and I'll be fine with it, and I'll watch baseball. But my preference would be, I'm down for some challenges, because you get challenges in pretty much every other sport. You get challenges already on the base paths. Why is this one area of baseball, unchallengeable when you have the technology to challenge it?
Yeah,
That's
and
my take.
yeah, another thing that I thought of was like, and you kind of just mentioned it a little bit there, was like a lot of the umpires that like all in all home plate umpires, like we see the calls that like we see the bad calls, but we don't necessarily see the good calls. And he, I mean, it would be very interesting to, have these guys be told that they're doing a good job and then, suddenly replace them. Right. And I guess it is kind of like echoing like what's happening right now in like the country, where like a lot of the employees of all these great companies are getting replaced by robots, like especially in factories. So I guess it's kind of happening in other places outside of sports, but um it would look different too, because I think like a lot of people have gotten used to, looking at strikes being perceived as where they end up instead of where they, cross over the plate.
Yeah.
And like I think you would have to get rid of the TV box. That's number one. I think you should do that regardless of it being there, because I think the TV box has kind of been a little bit
Are you
of a
saying even if it's challenge or full on robot ump, you're saying just get rid of that box?
get rid of the TV box if you add in the robot umpires or you keep it how it is. I've never been a
Yeah.
fan of it. I'd rather watch baseball without it, to be honest. So I mean, I think it would be a much better viewing experience. That way, every pitch doesn't need to be an argument. And because I like baseball that way. I like baseball where it's like, you know, every pitch, a pitch could be just out, off the outside corner, and it looks like the pitcher's trying to not throw a strike. It looks like he's just trying to paint that outside corner, with the two seam
Yeah.
fastball or whatnot. But
I
um,
mean, yeah, they have the technologies where like I don't need to see it every pitch either. They have the technology where sometimes on a pitch they'll between pitches they'll show like the release of the ball, and the
mhm.
track can come in and see if it hits the strike zone. And so if there's a close pitch and it's like a tight spot, like, oh, I want to see, was that a strike? But I don't need to see. And if there's any kind of challenge rules or a robot up, I think they need to get rid of it, because, like you said, it's not a perfect box. And so if you're on your national telecast and you say it's a strike, and then they challenge it and it's a ball, that
Yeah,
box is meaningless.
yeah, exactly. I think it's funny timing though, because like you and I both know someone that's at umpiring school right now, and like I'd imagine that these guys like that are there are learning to call balls and strikes with either a machine or somebody like actually pitching. And it wouldn't make much sense to teach them a skill that probably won't be used at a lot of the higher levels. But umpiring, of course, is different at every level. There's different rules. Of course, we're not getting an automatic strike zone in little
Yeah.
league or high school or any of that. But
Like
it
junior
is interesting.
college or D1 or D2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is interesting though, and I think it's definitely a fun topic to talk about. So, and of course, MLB, I
Yeah.
believe,
I mean,
needs to approve it. I think I saw too. So we'll see.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty close to, I think it's Sutter Health Park now. I always call it Rayleigh Field still,
Me
but the
too.
River Cat Stadium. So I'm going to be going there for a few games this year. And so it'll be interesting to check out. I'm interested to see if Rayleigh, if I almost did it again, but if, the River Cats home is going to be one of the challenge fields or one of the full on robot umps since it's kind of cut in half. But we'll see how it goes and how it impacts Major League Baseball down the road. I'm sure they have at least a year or two in mind to test it before they try to implement it in the big leagues. So
Yeah. I
we'll
can't
see
wait to
how
hear
it
more about
goes.
it because I'm having a shameless plug here. I'm having an MLB umpire, former MLB umpire in Rizzo cast, so I'm definitely going to ask him about it because I'm sure he has some thoughts. So looking
Nice.
forward to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, listen to Rizzo cast too. Anyway, so yeah, that we'll see how it goes with those. But to finish up here, if you listened to our episode first, thank you very much for listening. And we've had a few guests on. We started with our friend Andrew, and then we had Jared on, and then we had Barry. And if you remember with Jared, we called it the speedy shutdown. We had 5 kind of quick fire ish questions at the end. The episode with Barry, we didn't want to. We had already gone a little long, and we didn't
Yeah.
need to bug Barry with our speedy shutdown. But we were like, hey, we're going to be asking our guests this moving forward, so let's do it ourselves, just so listeners can kind of know where our heads are at, what we would do. And so, Steven, question number 1 of the speedy shutdown: if you could trade places with any player in today's game, who would it be?
I think I would honestly want to change places with probably if I had to. Julio Rodriguez, I think is pretty hard to deny right now. He'd be one of my options, but I'd have to go Otani in a w- and I hate to I like I mean,
You hate to steal my answer.
oh, is that your answer? Sorry. But like you're gonna get paid.
Dude,
Like
yeah,
you're
no, I mean, he can do everything.
he's about to get
But I mean,
paid.
as far as just like, yeah, he's gonna, unless he gets hurt this year, he's gonna get like, I think he's gonna get 500 million. But he can do everything. He's Babe Ruth in the year 2023. He can pitch, he can hit. Everyone loves the
He's
guy.
in SoCal, great spot, right?
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like? So yeah, Otani, it's funny because the other one would be like Mike Trout, just because he's so natural and effortless and just so great. And it's funny that both those guys are on the Angels and they still can't make the playoffs. But I think for me, I think it's Otani for sure for me. But
Yeah.
Rodriguez is a good one too. I mean, young face of baseball, whole career ahead of him, and just fun to watch. I think it's really fun that he's like in Seattle. Because when I think of like young face of baseball outfielders, like the first one in my lifetime was Ken Griffey Jr., and so it kind of brings it back full circle there.
Yeah. There's a lot of people like I was also thinking like what player has a better chance of making the playoffs and winning a championship? What player's in a good spot like locally? What player like has talent for days? There's a lot of variables you could go with that
Yeah,
question. So,
yeah, for sure.
Otani.
Yeah. All right. Number 2 on our speedy shutdown was funniest movie of all time, Steven.
I think it's funny because you and so many other people berate me for not watching a lot of the classic movies, and it's kind of like a running joke that we have. But I'll be honest, I've been trying very hard to catch up in recent years at watching some of the great movies. But I'm a big fan. You might appreciate this. I'm a big fan of what are they called? The group with Owen Wilson, Ben Stiller, Vince Vaughn, Steve
Oh, like the
Carell,
frat pack.
Frat Pack. I'm a big fan of them. Personally I love Owen Wilson. I love Will Ferrell. Love
Wow.
yes, big fan of the Frat Pack. So I'd have to go with anything they do. I like Wedding Crashers. Um, I like Zoolander. I think it's Zoolander is okay, I think, but I think it's funny still. And I also like a lot of Adam Sandler movies. So that's kind of my um my guilty pleasure is watching some of those classic Adam Sandler movies, Waterboy, um
Billy
Billy
Madison.
Madison, of course,
Is
Happy
that it, Dad? Did the
Gilmore.
penguin tell you to do this?
Yeah. I think
Uh,
Big Daddy's a pretty underrated one too.
yeah.
But I've and some of the ones that he's in, I give him a lot of credit because he does know how to turn like the switch because he's really good in the basketball one and what's it called? Hustle. I think it's called Hustle. And he's really good in
Uh,
Uncut Gems. So he's good in some of those dramas too.
yeah. Well, for me, I love comedies. One of my useless talents is remembering lines from movies. Like as you were reeling off those movies, I was just like saying different quotes in my head nonstop. Um, you know, Probably my favorite, where if I come past it, or is one that I watched multiple times in theaters, was Superbad. I love Superbad. Wedding Crashers. One of my friends and I can have full conversations only in Wedding Crashers quotes. Growing up as a kid, the American Pie movies 1, 2, and 3. After that, I didn't do band camp and all that crap, but the original American Pie, trilogy, if you will, helped shape my sense of humor a lot. So yeah, video movies like that, but I would say Superbad would be like my go-to if I had to choose one funniest movie of all time.
That's a good one. Sorry I didn't give you an exact movie, but I just like the Frat Pack and I couldn't decide between all of
Yeah,
those movies, but I like them a lot.
yeah. Let's see, number 3. If you could watch any player you never saw live, who would it be?
Oh, I'd have to say Barry Bonds. I'll say that because I never saw him live. If I was born 10 years earlier, I would have had a ball with Barry Bonds being in San Francisco. Even 15 years earlier would have been nice, but I like just missed him in my fandom. I was really young. Let's see, 2007 was his last year, so I was about 5 when he was, still in the game. So didn't I don't remember him. We had pictures of him hanging up like in the house downstairs, especially in the family room, but um never saw him. I hear about him a lot, and I hear about, I always hear the common Barry Bonds cliches, the one pitch a night. Jerome Williams was just telling me one pitch a night or one pitch a series, and he would hit it. And the Gold Gloves and the homers and all the fun stuff, but
Yeah.
never saw it. So that's one regret that I have that I can't control.
Hey, well, like luckily for you, you're young enough that you could have a guy like that, and you still have videos and highlights like
Oh yeah,
galore to watch. So that's pretty cool. Mine personally, I've mentioned it before. I think on the pod is Willie. Well, Willie Mays. I mean, Giants fan, obviously, and so just he was like the 5 tool player. He could do everything. He even talks about how he just like, and kind of like I talked about McCutchen, like he talked about how he just had fun out there. He loved playing baseball. It was never like a job to him. He loved playing baseball. And so, I would just love to go back and freeze my ass off one more time at Candlestick and watch Willie play. That would be really cool. If I had to throw a non-giant out there, I'd probably go Lou Gehrig, just because I was just always fascinated with him growing up. And, the Pride of the Yankees was one of the first baseball movies I ever watched. And so I always just like idolized him as a little kid. And so I'd love to see him, and, getting to see him play also opens the door to getting to see a lot of other players who were in the same lineup as him too. But I would go back for Lou.
yeah. I'll throw another non-giant in there. I'll say Ruth too, because like the reason Ruth is like really interesting to me is because he played in an era, he changed baseball by hitting home runs. Like
Oh, yeah.
nobody was doing that before him. They were the guys that
He,
choked up like 3 inches on the bat and hit singles and hit inside the park home runs. And the league leader had 9 homers a year. And like
Yeah, he would
Ruth
have
came
like
there.
more home runs than whole teams.
Exactly. Ruth came in there and like changed everything. So he's one, and I just want to be there just to see like the reaction of other people. And like, oh my God, like the home run, like I can't stress enough how big of a deal it was for people to watch the home run. They were so amazed by it.
Yeah.
Him and I think Clemente too, because like I've read Clemente's one of the guys that I've read a lot about, whether it be in books or documentaries, and he's one guy that I'm fascinated with, kind of the life that he lived and the impact that he had on the game. And in Latin America, I think it's still very much carrying over to today.
Yeah, yeah, he was my second non-giant if I was going to name a third person in there. So absolutely. All right, fourth on the speedy shutdown. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I would want to teleport. I would 100% want to teleport. I don't know if I took yours again, but uh like I thought of this because like I thought of like the most useful answer, and like obviously flying, of course, because like you wouldn't have to pay anything, and being invisible would be cool, but then again, like what it would, I feel like it would get tiring after a while. I don't really care about what's on people's minds to be a mind reader. Teleporting
Yeah,
would save you money on gas, on a plane ticket. um I mean, just imagine if like I could close my eyes and go like New York and open my eyes and I'm on Times Square. Like just imagine that. So I'll keep
yeah.
it short and I'll say teleporting.
Well, I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you saw my reaction. That was mine as well. I love to travel. As Steven said, it saves you money. Like, you could travel, you could go anywhere, no traffic for your day to day stuff. My second one I thought about, because I was hoping Steven wouldn't take teleportation. Like speaking every language, I think would be really cool. I don't know if that's a superpower. I know
That's a
there's some
good
people
one.
out there that know lots of languages. Awesome for you, but like being able to speak every language would be really cool. And I would almost look at that as a superpower because there's so many. But yeah, teleportation,
Hmm.
badass.
Or another thing, like even like with the language thing, what would be cool is like if like you had a filter turned on, and let's say like Shohei Ohtani, I'm in a conversation with him, obviously very limited English, he speaks Japanese, but what if I could like say something in English and then he would understand it, and then he responds back in Japanese, but I interpret it in English. You know what I'm saying? Like there's like a
Yeah,
so that's interesting. But you can't forget, Tyler, that we're the same people. So we're gonna have the same answers here, man. So
right.
and by the way, if because I know some of the viewers, Tyler's going on a trip, and if you lose your luggage tomorrow, Tyler, then I'm just gonna hit you with teleportation jokes and what could have been if we had teleportation. So
Yeah, I hope not, but yeah, we'll see. On the next episode of Shutdown Inning, we'll let you know if I wished I could teleport still. Um, and then if you could do anything in sports, what would it be?
sports writer. That's what I would want to do. Well, do I have to like change it up a little
Oh,
bit or
no, I mean, if that's what you wanted to do, go
yeah,
for it.
yeah, sports writer, be at the ballpark, travel the country and watch baseball. That is what I would want to do. Ideally, I would want a job like working at the Athletic. That would be really cool. Um, that is to me right now, I think that's every young sports writer's goal is to work at the Athletic. I think for a long time it was Sports Illustrated. Now I think it's the Athletic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that would be the goal, I think. Um, whether it be like on a beat or whether it be just like one of those national guys. That's like the all-time pipe dream. But that would be my goal in baseball. But if I were to be very outlandish, it would be pitching in the big leagues.
It would be what?
It would be sorry, I know it broke up for it would be pitching in the big leagues if I wanted to get really outlandish.
Okay, cool.
What about
Yeah, I was
you?
gonna I was gonna ask you to like, okay, if it was like on the field, what would it be, or on the court, as an athlete? So I
Pitching.
think that's kind of like the spirit of it all. I think, but yeah, I mean, I think if we're going not on the court or the field or whatever, I'm working on it. I want to see a ball game in every stadium in Major League Baseball, so I'm working on that. I'm about halfway there. On the field, as a baseball fan, I would obviously say, like hitting a walk-off home run would just be amazing. You have everyone kind of losing their mind, and you win the game for your team. As I mentioned, I was a catcher. I was a really good defensive catcher. I never had much of a bat after like senior league. So being able to have a big enough bat to hit a home run to win a game would be pretty awesome.
So maybe with these new like
Uh,
robotic umpires, would your value go down?
Probably. I mean, I would still call a good game. I called my own game from the time, basically almost from the time that like kids could start throwing multiple pitches.
Wow, that's wild.
I called my own game once it was like safe for, it wasn't like frowned upon for kids to throw off speed and stuff. So I could always call my own game. I was a really good, my license plate in high school was backstop because not a lot got past me. So yeah, it hurt it a little bit, I'm sure, but hopefully not too much. I would still be a solid, negative WAR with my negative bat. But no, I could hit for average. I just never had much pop.
Well,
But
in an
yeah,
era
I mean,
where
I think
everybody's hitting home runs, then maybe your approach would change if you came up with like today's youth, maybe
yeah,
you'd learn from them to elevate, hit bombs.
right.
So
Work on my launch angle.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we shut it down.
We completely shut it down. We like threw an immaculate inning again. We've done that a
We're
few
11
times.
for 11 on immaculate innings.
We are.
Immaculate shutdown inning. That's where we got to change the name of the podcast now. But no, thank you everyone again for listening. Hit us up if you have any comments or anything you want us to talk about. Steven, my man, pleasure as always.
Yeah, appreciate it. Enjoy your trip, and we have big things planned. So everybody, hopefully you stick with us. Spotify, YouTube, podcast, everywhere you find it. I think there's a few that we're still trying to get into, but stay tuned on that too. But I can't wait for the season to start. In spring training, we're like about a month away, so that's fun. So I can't wait
Yeah,
for that.
that's what's up.
All right, see you guys next time.